Hi guys, I'm Kendra. Welcome. Today we are going to be looking in John chapter 6 at the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000 men plus women and children. And I'm just going to hone in on one or two verses. So this is not a super in-depth study, just a short little snippet that will hopefully encourage you and motivate you, especially if you're going through a time of suffering. One thing that I hear all the time that I will be honest, I don't really believe it, and I don't really think that there's biblical support for it, is the phrase, everything happens for a reason. When you hear the phrase, everything happens for a reason, you are assuming that God made this happen. And that he made it happen because he had a purpose behind it. And he's gonna he did that to you. And while there are certainly things that I think God does do specifically in our life, I also think that sometimes we attribute evil to God when we say that. It's like, did God really make this happen? I don't know. Even with Job, even in the story of Job, yes, God allowed it. Yes, Satan came to the Lord and God said to him, have you seen my servant Job? And Satan is like, yeah, let me do these things to him. And God put restrictions. You can do these things, but you can't do these things, right? And so I don't think that God inflicts pain on us. Like, he can allow us to go through it, but God himself does not inflict pain on us. And so when I hear the phrase, everything happens for a reason, my thought is, God is sitting there going, I'm going to make this happen because I'm going to inflict pain on you. And the reason why, in the end, you'll see that happened for a good reason. And maybe in some situations people can think about it that way, but I will just say, as some of you may know from my those of you who know me outside of this channel, you might know that I actually lost my daughter last year, and she was stillborn at full term. And because of that, I've gotten involved in communities of other women who have also lost their babies. And one of the most damaging phrases that people will say to them, and you might be thinking, even if you believe this, you might think it's an insensitive thing to say and you wouldn't say it, that's great. But one of the most damaging things that is said to these women is that everything is happening for a reason, or everything happened for a reason, or God has a plan, God did this for a purpose. I don't think there's any ends that can justify the means, at least not in our human minds or our human flesh, of why your child should die, right? That's something very difficult to wrap your head around, and frankly, I don't see biblical support for it. I don't. But what I do see biblical support for, and what the Bible clearly tells us, is that God can work all things together for good. He can work all things together for good. So is it that good thing is going to be better than what there was before? I don't know, but something good is going to come out of it. Something good can come out of it. Now, if you look at John chapter 6, we read the story of how Jesus fed the crowd of the 5,000. And, it started off 5 loaves of bread, 2 fish. He starts passing it around. And in verse 12, it says, when they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, so Jesus says to his disciples, gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted. So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves that had been left over by those who had eaten. And I just love that because there's so many things in there that I love. That they're actually such a rich couple of verses. But one thing, I heard one person one time, I don't even know who it was, but I heard someone say that they had heard a pastor describe the story of the 5,000 as not being a miraculous thing that happened, but that when the kid shared his lunch, all the other people decided to share too, and then because of that, miraculously 5,000 people were fed? No, it says they gathered them and filled the 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. So very clear what happened here. Like, I can't imagine, like, don't you wish you could have seen that? Like, ripping off pieces of bread and then just like, there's enough for 5,000 people to eat, plus 12 baskets of leftovers, which is also really cool because there were 12 disciples following Jesus. There were more disciples, but the 12 disciples, they each got their own basket full of bread. I mean, it's just amazing how God can provide for us in all circumstances. Like, out of nothing, there's an overabundance to feed 5,000 and still enough left over to nourish and care for the 12. So I just think that's really amazing. But the key phrase here that I love is, it says, Jesus is talking, he says, gather the pieces that are left over and let nothing be wasted. And I just want to encourage you today that nothing in your life will be wasted. Nothing. No suffering, no pain, nothing that you go through is going to be wasted by the Lord. He sees your pain. He cries with you. I fully believe that. When I read the story of Lazarus, and Jesus gets there and Martha greets him, and Martha's like, yeah, I know you'll raise him up at the last day. And Jesus knew, he knew that Lazarus was going to be alive in the next couple of minutes, right? And Jesus, he told Martha that. Like, he knew, Jesus knew Lazarus is going to be alive. And he wept. He wept. Why was he weeping? He knew Lazarus is going to be alive. Why was he weeping? And I think that he looked at his friends, Martha and Mary, and he saw the pain they were in. And that made him weep. Because he loved them. And when you love someone, you empathize with what they're going through. When you love someone, you see that they're suffering, you see that they're in pain, and you hurt with them, you know? Like, you hurt too. Like, I don't want to see you hurting. It hurts me that you're hurting. I'm hurting because I see the pain that you are in. And Jesus, he cares about you. When he looks at your suffering, he's a loving God. He's a loving Father. Do you think that God is sitting there gloating over your pain? He's not. He looks at you and he loves you. And he weeps with you. Even though he can see the beginning from the end, even though he knows how all things are going to work together for your good, he weeps with you. He cries with you. But I can promise you this, he didn't put that pain in your life, but he's going to use it. He's going to use it. And I know that seems impossible sometimes. How could God use this in any way? What good could possibly come out of this situation? But he does. He uses everything. He uses absolutely everything for good. And I'll just give you my little personal testimony here. So as I said, my daughter, she passed away last year, full-term stillbirth. And I didn't understand how God could ever use that for good. Now, the Lord has shown me the next steps that he wants me to take in life. And I am going on to become a birth doula. And the reason why is because in my experience during my daughter's birth, when she was being born, we already knew, we had an induction of labor, and we already knew going into the induction that she didn't have a heartbeat. We prayed for a miracle. We hoped for a miracle. But we knew that she didn't have a heartbeat going into it. And I remember after she was born, and really I kept praying for her until the funeral when she was buried. I kept I prayed to hear a cry come out of her casket. I really did. But it didn't happen, and we buried her. And I remember thinking, how can anything good possibly come out of this? Maybe for other people. Maybe someone will look at us and be like, oh, wow, and they still believe in Jesus, and it'll be good for them to see that I went through this or something. But for me personally, how can anything good come from this? And now it's been about a year later, and that birth experience that I had when she was born, as difficult as it was, I also was so supported. I had so much love in the room, so much, just love. We had thankfully this was right before the COVID restrictions came into play. So there were not the restrictions at the time. And so my husband was there, my mom was there, my sister-in-law was there, my husband's aunt was there, and one of my spiritual mentors and best friends from my church was there. And they were all in the room with me and praying with me and playing worship music and talking with me, and it ended up being a heartbreaking outcome, but such a beautiful experience. Like I don't even know how to explain it. It was the hardest 3 days of my life. It was a 3-day induction process. It was the hardest 3 days of my life, but so, so beautiful. And I just, I want to bring, hopefully, regardless of the outcome, like I never want a baby to die, ever. But I hope that I can support moms giving birth, that no matter the circumstances, whether their babies are alive or not, that I can help them have the gentlest and the most supported and the most cared for birth possible, because I had that and I was so blessed to have that, and I want to be able to provide that for others, right? In my mind, does the end justify the means? 100%. I would rather have my baby here with me than to be a birth doula. Like, hands down. Like, I would give up everything to be able to have my baby here with me. But I also know that God still used my experience. He didn't let it go to waste. I don't believe God took my baby from me. I don't believe the Bible supports that. I don't. He's a good God. He loves us. I believe he cried with me when that happened. But then from that, he was able to say, okay, there's this terrible situation. Now we're going to try to have something good come out of it. Like I said, does the end justify the means? It doesn't have to. It doesn't have to. But I can promise you that your experiences that you go through when you surrender them to God, when you give them to God, he can use them for good. He can use them for good. He doesn't let a single thing in your life go wasted. And he will abundantly bless you. Maybe not in the ways that you wanted, maybe not in the ways that you had hoped or planned, but he loves you. And he is going to walk with you. He's going to hold your hand, and he will. You think there is no way he can do it. He will find a way to work your circumstances for good, for your good, and for his glory. Okay, God bless, and I'll talk to you later.